Coogs house. The Big 12 is a bunch of cowards, and Houston is the latest victim.
You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Coogs Daily Podcast about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth, and whether you're a Houston fan or it's a hater connected by, thank you for making Locked On Cougs a proud member of the Locked On Podcast Network, the number one sports podcast network in the world. Your first listen of the day. Appreciate you first listen each and every day here at Locked On Cougs. If you want to join the conversation and you don't know what to say, tell us in the comments down below. As we're talking about the Big 12 today, that's made me think of a dozen. What's something you like to have a dozen of? Is it donuts, cookies, anything in between? Today's show is brought to you by our buddies over at FanDuel, America's number one sports book and the best place to get on the action. NBA is back. You can get on the NBA action and more over at FanDuel. Talk to you more about that fun later. But I'll talk about how Big 12 is a bunch of cowards when it comes to putting timestamps on these football games. I'll talk about Pop-Tarts and the Pop-Tarts Bowl and what else could be coming down the road for the Houston Cougars in a couple of weeks, frankly. And then I also want to talk about, patting some guys in the back that won or are in contention to win some fairly big-time awards. But first, let's jump into it. This is a gigantic coward move by the Big 12. When the Big 12 set their timestamps for Week 13, so just over 2 weeks from now, or just under 2 weeks from today, and they'll put out the TV times for that, right? The Big 12 only put TV times on one football game. Oklahoma State and UCF is scheduled to be at 4 o'clock Eastern on the Saturday of Week 13. That's the only Big 12 game with the time. And listen, this is bogus for a lot of reasons, but it particularly strikes home for Houston. Houston has had 4 non-Saturday football games this year. The 2 of those that were in conference were not up to them, right? Frankly, the road one to Oregon State had its own push and pull as well, but that's the way the cookie crumbles sometimes, right? Of their Saturday football games, only 2 of them were played in the PM. I mean, like after noon, not like in the afternoon. I mean, like after noon, at local time anyway. And that's ridiculous. Of course, they're the most turnout and the biggest watch games for Houston this year against Tech at home and Arizona State on the road. Oh, yes, you heard that right. One of the only 2 Saturday PM games for Houston this year has been on the road. And look, I get that it's a rebuilding program. At the start of the year, you might not have known that. But the Big 12 did this when Houston was ranked. The Big 12 has done this when Houston's won 7 and 8 games now. The Big 12 has done this over and over again, not giving Houston decent time slots for these football games. And look, I look at Week 13 and admit that some Week 12 results will play a role. Like if BYU and Cincinnati both win their Week 12 games, that becomes a de facto playoff game, feeling kind of game. That's probably 7 o'clock prime time, right? I get that Week 13 BYU and Cincinnati has the potential to be a prime time matchup, right? I do get that. However, I kind of think that no matter the results of the weekend, Houston's at least second in contention for that against TCU. TCU has 3 potential weeks of spoiling ahead, right? They could spoil things in Cincinnati, could spoil things at Houston, could spoil things at BYU all throughout the next 3 weeks, right? And mathematically, Houston is not out of the Big 12 race to Arlington. It's not very likely. I'm not trying to say I'm holding my breath on it, although based on how I'm still, coming back from being under the weather over the weekend, maybe I should be breathing less out of my nose. I can't tell what's going on anymore. I've taken all the meds, but whatever, right? Um, I'm not holding my breath on Houston making it to Arlington, but mathematically they're not out of it. That TCU game could be gigantic for Houston in trying to get to that, right? It also, for its worth, is a rebuilding program and story that is in its final home game of the season, pushing for a 10-win season this year. And look, it's a big deal for Houston to get this in a good time slot that people will show up for. Houston's attendance has been somewhat of a conversation nationally in a bad way. And I don't think that the lack of Saturday PM games has helped that at all. I have a fairly strong arm. I think that it actually has hurt that. And look, regardless of time of day, Houston fans need to show up to TCU Houston, right? This is not rocket science. It's butts in seats. I don't mean tickets sold. I mean butts in seats. In the school, the athletic department, the fan base needs to do whatever they can to get more people there. Um, However, having this game, which is a sizable game for Houston, it could be the last game. It's probably the last game in the city of Houston for Houston in a great year. Having this on a 6-day window is really challenging for a lot of folks. Look, the University of Houston's in the city of Houston, but Houston's sprawled, and fans could live up to an hour away and still be in Houston, really, right? And being told suddenly that if you have tickets to the game on Saturday, but now your whole day's got to be rearranged to get there before 11 a.m., really closer to 10:30 a.m. to get to your all of that changes, and then you want to throw in tailgates and scenes and this and that changes everything, right? And Houston continues to get put in these spots. It's not that it's not our turn or whatever. Every school's got their turns through this. Every school gets this done to them. I get all that. But also, Houston's had a lot of turns at this, like a lot. They played 10 football games and had only 2 of them in the PM of a Saturday, right? That's ridiculous. And I think that ultimately we will see Houston get an afternoon time slot. I look at the slate of games that day and think that Houston's got favorable things there. But I also think that it's bogus that the Big 12 is going to make us wait again to find that out. I also have another idea. Houston ends the season in Waco, heading to Baylor to play the Baylor Bears in the final regular season matchup. Waco and Baylor have also had bad attendance issues. No one's caring or posting about it nationally in the same way because, of course, not. But they have really bad attendance this year, and it's dwindling, like dwindling, like lots of chairs the last handful of games on the TV screens, right? Waco's just under 3 hours away from Houston, depending on where you are in the city. It's the regular season finale for a season that deserves celebrating. Baylor is currently 5-4, but they play Utah this weekend, who's a heavy favorite, and then they have to go to Arizona the week before they play Houston. Game Time, shout out the sponsors, Game Time, have tickets for that game in Waco in the lower bowl for in the end zone for less than $40. Lots of options to get in the gates for less than $50. And based on what you see on TV lately with Baylor, I bet when you get in the gates, you can pick your seat. Frankly, it looks like to me. Look, they may have already fired Aranda or given him the, get to finish the season, but it's over when it's over kind of talk at Baylor or whatever. But I wonder if Houston fans can, show up and show out to a game in Waco if they make it a decent time slot as well, right? Like, look, I understand Houston's had their own attendance issues, and this is me asking a lot, but why not have 2 games with a bunch of red in the stands to finish the season, both home against TCU and then again in Waco, the closest conference game you'll play. And it sounds like a pretty easy ticket to get. I mean, why not? Um, Ways to celebrate this team more often than not. And frankly, given the limbo you get put in here with this stupid 6-day, I hate the 6-day window. I get it. It's part of the TV dollars. The TV dollars will make the world go round, the whole college sports thing. But it's just so stupid. It's annoying. It's really annoying. And again, it's another time where this continues to happen to Houston. And it just feels inevitable. It's going to be 11 a.m. It just like it shouldn't be an 11 a.m. kickoff. It just feels like it's going to be an 11 a.m. kickoff. And that's just so freaking frustrating. One thing that doesn't have to be frustrating, though, is bowl projections. Houston's in them. I want to talk about them. Before we get to that, today's show is brought to you by everybody's trying to get you into them as well, and that is our friends over at Game Time, because college football is back. College football is in full swing. Bowl season's near. The tailgates, rivalries, energy in the stands. There's nothing like college football. But if we're being honest, getting tickets can be more of a battle than the game itself. Endless queues, hidden fees, prices jumping at checkout. That's why at Locked On we tell you to use Game Time, the app that takes advantage and gives the advantage back to the fans. The easy way to score last minute tickets at the best prices with no surprise fees. What you see is exactly what you pay when you toggle it over. Look, a couple taps here back and forth. You get into Waco or into Houston for either one of the last couple games here for the football season. Really, really affordably. Like I mentioned, you get in the lower bowl at Waco for less than $40. You get into the Houston game for similar prices as well. All kinds of fun things here. So take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, Granite County's code Locked On College for $20 off your first purchase. Turn to apply again. That's promo code Locked On College, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Swipe, tap, ticket, go, and download Game Time. Parker Ainsworth, Locked On Coogs. You're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the number one sports podcast network in the world. And I want to talk about the bowl projections that keep on spinning for Houston. Because as we just mentioned in the last segment, Houston's got a real chance at 10 wins this season. TCU and Baylor finish it up bye week before that. You can't lose bye weeks. Okay, you shouldn't lose bye weeks. Probably a better way to say that. But you can't take an L in your record on a bye week, right? And experts have been putting Houston in all kinds of different bowl games. Couple common ones you see here. ESPN's got a pair of experts. They both have Houston in the Pop-Tarts Bowl, which would have to do with where they have Houston ranked in the Big 12 to end the season. One of them says that would mean Houston plays Miami. The other has Houston playing Georgia Tech. I think both of those are fun matchups. I will say, I think that Ruben Bain guy at Miami is crazy good. I'm not as worried about Carson Beck as Miami as other people are. Meanwhile, Georgia Tech, I think, has been good, but in a position where they haven't played a whole lot of really quality opponents. So it'd be interesting to see how Houston matches up there. Sports Illustrated and also Athlon, although it feels like Sports Illustrated and Athlon are both written very similarly, which raises questions, but that's not today's rabbit hole. Not today's rabbit hole. Sports Illustrated and Athlon both have Houston in the Alamo Bowl down there in San Antonio versus USC. Now, I would point out it's a trip that Houstonians made very, very well and in big numbers to go watch Houston in the Final Four just a few months ago, just down the road to San Antonio. And while this is not obviously the same magnitude, it's not a college football playoff game, which would probably be more of the equivalent to a Final Four. I would think that a wintertime celebration while people are off of work in a lot of jobs would be a good chance to go celebrate a great season for the Cougs in San Antonio. Also, I think it's interesting to see that USC be traveling a long ways, and that's not to say that USC fans don't travel well or anything like that, but I would hope to see a lot of Houston Cougar red in the stands in that one. And then CBS, what might be the most interesting one, has Houston playing in the Texas Bowl, right there, NRG, against the LSU Tigers. Now, the Texas Bowl isn't traveling, and there are no Pop-Tarts, and let's be honest, both of those things are fun. But I almost feel like the Texas Bowl with LSU is the most favorable one. Favorable. Why did I stumble over that word? Favorable. The Texas Bowl with LSU is the most favorable one right now for Houston to look at. It's an SEC school, which would be a great notch in your bedpost to kind of shatter that, I don't know, mystique. I don't think it's very real right now, but people think of that conference and think of a bunch of big highfalutin things. And frankly, when Houston beats LSU in the Texas Bowl, there'll be a bunch of excuses about who did and didn't play and how good LSU is or isn't, or yet there will be a bunch of hypothetical things surrounding it that'll change it in the eyes of some people. I get that. But in a realistic, non-hypothetical sense, LSU is a very beatable team. They're in a very crazy spot right now with their coach, where They fired Brian Kelly, but there's illegal act from the school about what they have to pay him. Like, it's a lot of turmoil around the program. Currently 5-4, but their wins are a bad Clemson team who, when they did play, I'll admit, myself included, thought Clemson had a shot to be pretty good this year. Turns out that they were not. But in a low-scoring game, LSU did beat them. They beat Louisiana Tech, which, hats off, I guess. They beat Florida, who has also had a bad enough year to fire their own coach there in Gainesville. Shouts to that win. And they beat Southeast Louisiana, which was a real game they played. They beat Southeast Louisiana. And then South Carolina, who is not going to be bowl eligible, is currently 3-6 and may do some cleaning house of their own before the season's over. I say all that to say that LSU, of any 5-win team looking to be bowl eligible, has one of the worst resumes out there. And look, I think they've got talent. We know very, personally, AJ Halsey there is a very talented defensive back, right? I think they've got some talent there at LSU, but they're clearly a program that's kind of crumbling. And I don't mean to say that you don't want to test yourself or you want the easy path, but man, if you're trying to distort some notions about SEC schools as Houston, and you got matched up with one at home, relatively speaking, in NRG in the Texas Bowl, I would think LSU would be the perfect one. It also draws some regional rivalry there with the Bayou region of America. A bunch of LSU fans would be there. You'd hope a bunch of Texas Bowl seats to get sold to both sides. You hope some Texas Bowl thing would split what the best they could. But honestly, like, you'd hope for a bunch of Houston red as much as you can, right? I I think that's an interesting matchup for Houston in a lot of ways. And obviously, we'll break down what happens when we get there. But like, honestly, I could see Nussmeier sitting out the Texas Bowl for LSU, their quarterback. Why is he going to play in that game? I don't think Houston would have the same kind of deal where they'd have a bunch of guys sitting out because honestly, only a couple guys are pro eligible and going to be drafted. So I don't think you have a bunch of guys sitting out for that reason. And then a lot of other guys are looking to come back. And so what would you be putting together on the football field to get better for the next season? I think you'll see Houston retain a lot of guys to the bowl game, but I could stand to be proven wrong. I think LSU is a great option for the Texas Bowl and moving forward there. Now, selfishly, for the swag, the story, the fun, the content, I would point out that the Pop Tarts Bowl's got the most of all of that, right? We probably talk Pop Tarts every day for a couple, question of the day kind of questions to open the show. We probably talk about Pop Tarts with a number of different people. I also think that the Big 12 taking out the ACC in that game is important for conference standing this year. Now, I think the Big 12 is a multiple CFP bid league this year, which would mean that a lower ranked team in the Big 12 will be playing a higher ranked ACC team, if I'm making any sense there. So like it'd be the 4, maybe even the 3 of the Big 12 versus like the 2 of the ACC. And that's not quite even, but I think it would say a lot or speak volumes if the lower ranked Big 12 team beat the ACC team in that matchup. I also think that, like I said at the start of the year, college football is better when the city programs have good teams. USC, Houston, Miami, schools that are based in cities because you can get the big city markets involved. It's a lot more fun sport. I think having the way that, Miami in the heyday of Miami lockdown, like the state of Miami, kind of that program, and then have these, Houston and the way that Fritz is recruited for Houston, the fun of storylines and the comparisons there. Miami's obviously a smaller private institution where Houston's big and public, but I think it'd be a fun comparison to be drawing there. And then Georgia Tech, I'm kind of tired of hearing about them. You probably hear a lot about like these A&M quarterbacks between Haynes King and Connor Wigman and whatever, but I'm kind of tired of hearing about Georgia Tech being good at stuff. They haven't played a whole lot of people, and it'd be fun to play that game and shut that storyline down some. All of that is to say, Houston's in a great spot, and while I think playing LSU in the Texas Bowl is a fun outcome, I don't think there's a bad outcome on the docket here. And so that I think offers a lot of fun things. Now, one of the fun thing in the football season, as far as stuff coming out this week, is that Houston's got a couple guys that are up for some pretty big time awards. And we'll talk about that in just one second. But first, Today's show is brought to you instead of the Open by our buddies over at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because the NBA is back. And there's no better place to get in on the action than the official sports betting partner of the NBA, FanDuel. Even if you miss a start of the game or want to ride the hot hand, maybe you see what's going on early, or they're going to exploit that matchup throughout the entire night. FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score the next basket to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can combine your live bets into a same game parlay for shots at bigger payouts. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team is making that last last minute push. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $3 in bonus bets when that first $5 bet hits. So head to FanDuel.com, sign up, and play your game with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. Parker Ainsworth locked on Coogs here. And yes, Houston's got a pair of receivers, I guess one receiver, one tight end, up for the Biletnikoff Award, which is a little crazy. So right now, Houston's got another player nominated, and that is obviously Amare Thomas, received his nomination for the Biletnikoff Award on Monday. You also have Tanner Koziol, who's been on the list since preseason. We talked about that at the start of the year. And I think that obviously doubles, but helps Houston's odds in getting a semifinalist in this award. Houston's last semifinalist was 2022's Tank Dell. For what it's worth, that year went to Jalen Hyatt of Tennessee. Hyatt's an NFL player right now for the New York Giants. But like Patrick Edwards has not won this award. Donnie Avery did not win this award. You go back like Patrick Cooper. Okay, Patrick Cooper's a little bit of cheating because the award didn't start till 1994. But the award, its nomination, etc., is a big deal for Houston, right? Yes, Jeremiah Smith at Ohio State's probably the odds on. I mean, he's the odds on favorite right now at FanDuel. He's probably going to win the award. He's presently got 65 catches, 10 touchdowns, over 860 yards. And frankly, there's been a couple games where they're up so much the fourth quarter he's not playing. I get that, but Houston has two different players on the watch list, and they haven't had that in quite some time. So in 2021 and 2, he had Tank Dell on the watch list. In 2022, he was a semifinalist. Marquez Stevenson was on the watch list in 2018, 19, and 20, but never made to a semifinalist. Linnell Bonner and Chance Allen were both on the list in 2016. Bonner was also on in 2017. DeMarcus Ayers was on in 2015. That's kind of how the last decade has been. And I think it's worth pointing out, like, those guys, with the exception of 2016, were all kind of on their own. Houston has two guys on it this year. And I think that speaks kind of where the offense is. And frankly, the offense is, after having lost, for all intensive purposes, coming into the year, you thought was your number one receiver, and Stephon Boogie Johnson, right? Tanner Koziol is also up for the Mackey Award this season. He is leading all Titans America in receptions per game. He's top 3 in receptions, top 3 in receiving yards, top 3 in receiving touchdowns. He is the only Houston Cougar to be named as a semifinalist for the Mackey Award in the history of the award. I would point out too, if we're looking at the Big 12 as a conference, there are 8 semifinalists. 4 of them play in the Big 12. Tanner Koziol being one of those 4. And look, I think this conference is really great quarterbacks, and I think that probably is why there are so many great tight ends. I would also say there's a number of receivers in the to the semifinalist stage yet, but at the watch list stage of the Biletnikoff Award, I think that probably also plays in the quarterback, the experience that they bring, and all of that. But I think that Houston's got a really good shot at winning that one. Look, it's a receiving tight ends award. And I know that Trig guy at Baylor's had some crazy catches, but Tanner Koziol statistically is having a stronger year in many ways. And frankly, a stronger year in an offense that is still very much run first, even with the quarterback, right? And so I think all of that is to say that I don't know if they win the Biletnikoff or not. Amare Thomas making the list this late, it feels like a very intentional ad. He's leading the Big 12 in receiving yards, and he's killing it this year. And frankly, has kind of elevated his game since Boogie Johnson went down. I don't know that he wins the award. I do think Tanner Koziol has a real shot at this Mackey Award, and perhaps that is my own wishful thinking, but I do think that's important. Now, why is that important for the Houston Cougar football program? You kind of see these things snowball when you're a tight end recruit in the transfer portal or a tight end recruit coming out of high school. You're looking at where they produce the best tight ends. It's how Iowa, Stanford have for so long kind of dominated that market, right? Same with receivers in Ohio State. If you are a potential future Biletnikoff Award winner, you're looking like, okay, well, what programs are producing Biletnikoff Award winners? Ohio State has several over the last decade. You end up at Ohio State, right? Having guys on these lists, having guys gather these accolades, and again, I think Tanner Koziol may win the award, helps you in the recruiting process when you're looking at the next tight end, the next wide receiver, the next big time athlete. Now, class 2026 is really, really strong, right? So I don't mean to say that they need a lot of help, but wouldn't hurt. Like, let's just be honest. Like, that's a good thing for the program to go do. And I think that we could see it unfold for Houston in a very positive kind of way. Now, obviously, if either of them, Koziol or Amare Thomas, make the Biletnikoff finalists or semifinalists, we'll talk about that on the show as well. If one of them wins it, that gets a much bigger portion of the show because it's a big thing for the program and the player. Obviously, that's a lot to talk about. There's more to talk about basketball later today. There's more to talk about with football in the bye week this season. Oakland on Wednesday night for basketball, Auburn next weekend, all kinds of chaos and things happening with the Houston Cougars. So you should follow all of it here at Locked on Cougs, the number one daily podcast for all things Houston Cougars, and prime member of the Locked On Podcast Network, the number one sports podcast network in the world. Thank you all so much for tuning in today, making Locked On Cougs your first listen each and every day. If you're looking for a second listen, I'm going to recommend listening to Drake's Locked On Big 12, where they break out things around the entire conference, including who's going where, who's winning what, and more. So go check out that for your second listen of the day. Remember, Locked On Podcast, your team every day. Go Cougs.